Hi, everyone, and welcome to the China EVs More podcast, where my co-host, Lei Sheng, and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the global EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discuss today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. For those that are new to the show, welcome. And to our loyal listeners and viewers, welcome back. We ask that you help us get the word out about this podcast to others. And of course, tune in again next week. Hit those smash those like and subscribe buttons, everyone. My name is Tu Li. I am the managing director at Sino Auto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Lei, a traveling volleyball, a volleyball dad, Lei, can you please introduce yourself? I am super tongue-tied this morning for some reason.
Yeah, a Midwestern Lei. I have to remember I'm an hour behind you, so it's actually 8 a.m. here.
Well, that's it? Okay.
I have to remember that, otherwise we miss the show. I'd miss the show if I did 9 a.m. here.
And I must apologize for the live audience because we're a few minutes late. That's on me. I had some morning stuff going on that I couldn't avoid.
Morning tongue-tied.
That too.
Yes, this is your co-host, Lei Sheng, former chief editor of China Auto Review, and this is episode 242. It's March Madness, and I'm not talking about college basketball.
Although there were a couple upsets that night.
So, congrats to XPeng on achieving first quarterly profit. Congrats on NIO delivering 80,000 6 months after its launch. Congrats to Rivian getting a 1.25 billion check from Uber. We'll get to that, And then Xiaomi, I think SU7 was the launch of the week, although I think the limelight compared to 2 years ago, I think wasn't nearly as high as back then. I think it's lost some luster, although it was still the top selling sedan above renminbi 200,000 last year, beating the Model 3. And then we had a couple of other launches or reveals. The Zeekr 8X, Iceland GT7, a new brand. So that's part of the March Madness. And we can begin, I don't know.
This is all leading up to third week in April, last week in April, to the Beijing Auto Show.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to get excited. I'm starting to figure some things out. And as always, Lei, it is so difficult to really stay in front of everything that's going on, especially when we're not here. Once we get there, it all kind of hits us. It punches us in the face because we actually see the cars, we talk to the people, and you and I talk to them regularly anyways, but it's different when you're face to face and you're kind of like, oh man, it's so nice to see you. One of the things that I think we could both observe is that their level of optimism from 5 years ago to today is completely different. I think they have much more confidence in the companies that they all work at, the products that the companies are building. And I think that they are starting to really understand how to connect, or at least get that feedback loop from the consumer to improve their products. And they improve them 2-3x faster than the legacy automakers.
Yeah, so the new SU7, I think we start there a little bit because one of the viral moments was Legion bringing these big shots.
Yeah.
Right? I posted a photo of the photo op with Wang Chuanfu, He Xiaopeng, Li Xiang. William Li noticeably is missing this time around. 2 years ago, he was in that crowd. The chairman of BAIC Group, also Wang Xingxing, the founder of Unitree,
Yes,
which just got approval for their IPO. I think the preliminary approval for IPO, they were part of the commotion or a guest of honor. Legion just knows how to put up a show, right? But back to the model itself, I think the
And they're friendly. They're friends. Some of them are friendly. Some of them are friends. But
they're
Lei
folks,
Jun
and
also,
they're competitors.
yes. And Lei Jun also knows how to kind of not pressure them, but pressure them into being a part of his celebrations.
Yeah. No, but back to the SU7 itself, right? So the only number they've revealed so far is a locked-in order of 15,000 in the first 34 minutes.
34.
Yeah, I don't have the updated, or they haven't published the updated data, but I don't know what to make of it, because last year it was the firm orders, right? Not the locked-in orders. That was kind of viral, right? And in 24 hours. But I think this time around, the competitive environment is much, much more complex compared to 2 years ago. Even though the SU7 was the top selling model in the 200,000 RMB sedan, top selling sedan, EV sedan. Last year, we know the competition, right? Once we get to March Madness, once we get to the Beijing Auto Show, it's hard to keep a thunder, if you will, right? You're not the only one making a thunder. There's tons of new product launches starting from this point on all the way till Beijing Auto Show. Try to push for that kind of the rebound, right? The spring rebound, the early summer rebound. So I think I sense a little bit of, even among, right, the industry circles, even among the medias, the KOLs, the chatter wasn't as high as the first time around. It's the maturation of the product, but it's also the competition.
And I think that first time around, it was just, well, I don't know if we can compare first and second time, because the first time around, the SU7 was the first product full stop for Xiaomi in the automotive space. Now, I think the second car, or the second iteration of the SU7, is actually more important, because it'll tell us what they learned over that time frame. It's not only incorporating SU7 learnings, but some of the U7 learnings. And what I can tell you, Lei, is that there are quite a few of these SU7s in the United States. And let me just say that there are many companies and organizations kicking the tires on them. And many of these people that are looking at these cars for the first time, and it's not only the SU7, there are other cars, Chinese cars here, they are really, really amazed, shocked, fearful. I think these are all the right descriptions that I would use in talking to these people who have driven for the first time with these vehicles, these Chinese vehicles. We're going to pat ourselves on the back, because from day one, when I got into these vehicles, I knew that there was a gap, but then the year after, that gap closed significantly. And I would say in 22-ish, they got better, just full stop. Okay. Because you and I were in early Neos, early XPengs, early Li Auto. So Li Auto to me was probably the leader at the very beginning with the L9. The fit and finish was great. Everything was great. And then everybody else is on equal par, in my opinion. Now, we can debate about design and whether or not it's friendly, or the user experience is good or not, but I don't think we can debate about the level of quality and fit and finish of these products now.
Yeah, we can also debate about how much they look like Porsches, because we have the Land GT7 and most recently the Shangjie Z7, all having some kind of resemblance to the Porsche silhouette, with the SU7 being the kind of the copycat, lack of a better word, but the Porsche Taycan, right? And there's seems to be a bunch of these new car models that when you squint, right? You love to use the word squint. You see some kind of Porsche, but on the flip side, right? I also posted a picture of 3 upcoming foreign brand EVs: the ID Era 9X, the ID Unix 08, the Nissan NX8. Their interiors, how they've now fully turned into the Chinese style cockpit that you wouldn't recognize if you cover the badge on the steering wheel. You wouldn't know that it's a Nissan, or you wouldn't know that it's a Volkswagen. is completely turned. So the opposite extremes happening, which is kind of weird.
It's actually a bit unfortunate because I appreciate what Ferrari is doing with Johnny Ive, trying to be a little bit different. Now, with Ferrari, it's a huge, huge risk because they only build a few thousand cars a year. The one of the reasons that Toyota is successful, Volkswagen Group or Volkswagen brand is fairly successful historically, is that they try to find the lowest common denominator in design, meaning that a grandma would understand it and like it, and a 17-year-old man or boy or girl would still understand it and like it. Unfortunately, those types of designs, because they are trying to be acceptable, not even delighting, but acceptable, it creates bland design. Okay. And this is where the technology takes over for the Chinese automakers, because you and I think we agree that generally when we look at a B segment crossover, the silhouettes are very similar in general, unless we're talking like the boxy style, Fangcheng Bao 5 kind of thing. But that's
No,
where the technology needs to take over.
I think in the case of the cockpit, it is something that you must do, that you need to do. Whereas on the other side, the extreme, kind of the exterior designs of these newer brands from China, it kind of turns me off a little bit because they do have originality, but when you look at them and you see the kind of the Porsche silhouette design language, it kind of turns me off. It kind of goes back rather than forward. I really don't like that. But yeah, I just wish that they'd done a better job in terms of design. But that's how it is. I wish it could be different. That they could do better.
So what do you think of XPeng's announcements?
Well, I think XPeng, first of all, here's a wrinkle. For the first time in history, in the same quarter, NIO, XPeng, Li Auto, Leapmotor, they were all profitable. I think let that sink in a little bit, because just a while ago, I think people in the industry were still questioning the viability of these companies. Okay, so now they're profitable. Li Auto and Leapmotor, they're profitable full year, whereas XPeng and NIO, they were profitable for the first time on a quarterly basis. But how they got there are slightly different, because XPeng, okay, they have some more of a benefit of a Volkswagen, right? If you look at their sales from other or service or other revenues, there's a huge balloon of that. It's because of Volkswagen. And now Volkswagen is going to be the first foreign automaker utilizing the VLA 2.0 and the chip, the Turing chip. But I think of that kind of helping offset the pressure on sales this year. I mean, the first quarter, right? They gave guidance was 60-some thousand units. That's far.
Well, the Volkswagen CTO also talked about using Horizon as well.
Right. That's the Horizon joint venture that they have on different tiers of products. So XPeng has the benefit of Volkswagen, same as Rivian has the benefit of Volkswagen's investment, whereas NIO's or the autos, they don't. But the other thing, I actually listened to a bit of the earnings call before we jumped in. He Xiaopeng said their kind of the future mission is to be a global leader in the so-called agentic, physical AI agents. To be a global leader in physical AI agents. Okay, because now they're applying this VLA to their EVs, their robotaxis, their
humanoid
robots, and the eVTOL flying cars, right? And this comes on the heels of NVIDIA GTC. We heard about what Jensen said, right? This agentic AI, this OpenClaw is the next ChatGPT moment, right? Not only generating things for you, but doing things for you. And XPeng's products are those type of things. Same with Li Auto's Li Xiang said for their Livis, right? So think about that a little bit.
And XPeng is one of the companies that is really, really, really to your point for the last 2 minutes, they're really trying to broaden who they are to the public, to the media. We're an AI company. We're an eVTOL company. We're a robotics company. That is a complex set of seemingly disparate sectors, and differentiator needs to be the silicon design because everyone else is doing that as well. And silicon design is such a capital intensive kind of process that if they're not careful, if they're successful, and the Turing chip seems like it's one of the leaders in the Chinese domestic silicon design sectors, because I've not heard too much about the horizons, although they did say that they're launching some silicon that is going to rival Thor. And that's pretty bold to me. But
yeah, he also mentioned something about, so in the robotics world, there's something called the 3Bs, the brains, the bronze, and the batteries, right? So we know the batteries, we know the brains, but the bronze, the middle part of it, is what actually He Xiaopeng said they're kind of unique in how that iron robot moves, how their joints move. I think they have an advantage over there. We'll see, but that's his kind of the comment. I think that's also the middle part of it is also the majority of the I don't know, $1 trillion opportunity in the robotics, right? So they're figuring that out, and they want to be different than the rest of the competitions. And he did mention that gradually you go from kind of the commercial, industrial to home evolution of where these robots are going to be used. So, I mean, yeah, that's what I heard this morning.
And
But-
not to be outdone by their other, let's call them hobbies for now, because they haven't really commercialized any of them. They've gotten 8 consecutive months of 30,000 units, which is tremendous for them. Let's hope that that's their floor from now on. They're going to be launching 2 products in Mexico next week. And so I don't see, as long as companies like XPeng and BYD continue to push, everyone else is, especially in the China market, is going to have to try to keep up.
So XPeng, yeah, they're launching 4 new products this year. 2 of them, one of them will be the GX that we talked about quite a few times. They lack this large ESA-like XUV. Now they're going to add it. The 6-seater.
I think SOP is this month.
Yeah,
Or next month.
Q2 launch.
Next month.
Q2
Yeah,
launch.
next
Yeah,
month.
Q2 launch. And then the Mona compact SUV based on the Mona MO3, right? This is cheaper. I think the first quarter, the first 2 months, the numbers weren't quite good. If we're being pessimistic a little bit, 20,000 in January, 15,000 in February. But he did say month on month, roughly close to 100%. So we're expecting, right? So 30,000 in March. And then I don't know what they're going to say about annual, because we did hear NIO, and NIOs want to grow 40 to 50%, Li Auto 20%, which get them to about 470,000, 480,000. XPeng did 430,000 in 2025. How much further can they grow this year? I think there's a lot of pressure.
The biggest part of Li Auto, NIO, XPeng continue to grow significantly year over year is the lower, the weaker players needs to leave the market. I don't know
Also,
Go ahead.
NIO and Li Auto in particular, they have the better SUV moat, whereas XPeng kind of lacks a little bit. Their G9 and G6
I think
old.
they make it up in the pricing.
Yeah,
because the G9 and G6 are a step function cheaper. And I was really impressed. It's still a head scratcher that it's a 5-seater, but I was really impressed with the G9 over a year ago that we drove.
Yeah. So, but that's pretty much. And we also saw the numbers. I think in the CPCA gave some guidance about 1.7 million passenger vehicles, 900,000 NEVs in March. Still over 50%, right? Take rate, but the volume, the absolute volume seems to be still trying to get back to where it was at the end of last year. All right, Rivian, my question to you, Uber's check, is that a smart move or a dumb move?
So I just look at it like similar to what Amazon had announced with Rivian with the commercial vans. So the first check is actually going to be $300 million. And it's not so in order to get that at 1.25 billion, there are escalators and there's KPIs that they need to meet. So I always love the fact that if there's a volume play, that they take advantage of it. These startups, because it fills the factory and it decreases the pressure tremendously on selling to the private customer. Now, if you and I buy a Rivian R2 for $50,000 to $60,000, Lay, are we going to want to see that car picking us up as a Robotaxi in San Francisco? Because if it'll need to be decontented and simplified, obviously, but as Western consumers, can we reconcile that? Because it's like in Europe where there's Mercedes-Benz taxis. It's like, so that's kind of a risk. How they want the R2 Robotaxi versus the R2 for private passengers. I think that's important to kind of really, really figure that out and make it a clean break.
Yeah, I think that's just going to be a big question mark from a consumer perspective. But volumes, I mean, they're nowhere near what they want. 50,000, right? Robotaxis over the next 5 years in USA, Canada, and Europe, right? 3 regions. I think we look at this from 2 perspectives, right? One from the perspective that you just talked about, from let's say a Rivian and Lucid's perspective, is that the only viable US American smart EV startups are now both depending on Uber play. It's quite interesting to get the Robotaxi as a major part of their strategy going forward. That's number one. And then from Uber's side, it feels like that they're now trying to rapidly catch up on what they try to do before, but in a different way, which is to utilize these assets that have the tech and the platform and the architecture, and then say, Uber, we're going to be at the center of this AV revolution, but we have these partners helping us.
So I think you're referring to Uber's old division, the ATG, Advanced Technology Group, that was based in Pittsburgh. And then one of their vehicles ran over a woman and killed that woman. And they effectively closed that division down and sold it to...
So Uber is ready to spend, right? They're ready to work with every single. I mean, you talk about WeRide, Baidu. You talk about Wave. I mean, Uber's all over the news ever since the year of the horse started, right? AVs in general.
And if you think about it, Lay, like one of the biggest things is people think robotaxis are going to be a high margin business. If there are a lot of competitors in the market, it's going to depress margins. And even in the United States with Lucid and Rivian, Zoox and Nuro all coming on board with the 800-pound gorilla Waymo, how do they gain share? They have to decrease the price. And so all these multi-trillion-dollar forecasts and these market caps for a Tesla at over $1.5 trillion, are they going to be warranted because of we went from like Waymo to now there's 5, 6, 7, including Motional now too. And I'm all here for it because that'll bring prices down. But now it's not clear to me that these are trillion-dollar companies unless they clearly.
Yeah, it's like you're at a poker table, right? So Uber, everybody's sitting there, they're going all in, right? Who's going to be the winner? Oh, well, we don't know, not at this point. But it feels like that Rivian and Lucid are almost like, how can they be viable as a standalone smart EV startup? Let's not talk about the robotaxis, but let's just talk about producing, selling these EVs that the consumers will buy. I feel like they don't have confidence in that. So they add this on to, they invite Uber or actually Uber talk to them. I don't know how that works, but it just feels like
a
little bit over dependent.
I just think that reality set in because they spent all this money, this capex, on building factories, and then these factories aren't full. And so shareholders are like, my goodness, there's zero margin. You're not making any money. You can't sell these cars. And so in order to stay independent, as opposed to like a Lucid being acquired by Mercedes or BMW or something like that, or a Rivian being acquired by Volkswagen Group, they're like, you know what? We're going to, these are, to me, they almost feel like these are bridge loans. With Uber, they're being the picks and shovel people. Regardless of whatever region you're in, let's say ex-China, you can use our Uber app. We're going to have Wave in the UK. We're going to have Baidu in Germany, and we're going to have Waymo in San Francisco and LA. And so I totally get Uber's strategy, and it makes a lot of sense. But if you start owning cars like Uber has kind of pivoted towards, then that changes the entire balance sheet for them, which is a little weird. And I'm trying to still reconcile that part of it.
Yeah. So it's big bets from all front, and Uber especially. It feels like they're just like all in. They're just trying to invest or partner up with everybody. Like almost it feels like that.
And I
then at the
feel
same,
like,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say at the same time, the GTC, when NVIDIA is another kind of the component in this ecosystem, how they want to be a player, right? They signed the partnership with BYD and Geely on the Robotaxi ready kind of the Hyperion platform with all these OEMs. I mean, right? He mentions the 18 million production number across the 4 OEMs, and he's like, right? I think that he threw out that number just to give you kind of a potential of all of these vehicles on the road somehow, like what He Xiaopeng talks about, right? He thinks that in 1 to 2 years, next 1 to 3 years, the era of fully autonomous driving, what exactly that is, I'm not still clear, but he says it's coming, right? The kind of from L2 to L4 that you can own, a personal consumer can own level 4 versus a robotaxi. Yeah, is there another hype, or is just a process of scaling? I'm not sure at this point, but right.
And I look at the partners that Jensen announced at GTC as, I was going to go, but I'm traveling next week, and so
Try to get a sweater, $178 sweater, the green sweater. You saw that, right?
Yeah, but yeah. So I have a few friends at NVIDIA, a few senior friends that I keep in touch with here and there. I look at Geely and BYD partnering with NVIDIA because you wonder, right? Like, because Geely has its own system and BYD has its own system. To me, that's going to be their partner ex-China. In case US type restrictions come to Canada, come to Europe. US type restrictions meaning no connected software, no connected hardware, no Chinese connected hardware and software. This is their way of, you know what? We're going to qualify the NVIDIA system. We're going to continue to use our system until they tell us we can't. And to me, that's kind of their plan B.
Yeah.
A little bit. Now, if NVIDIA gets to the point where Alpamayo is better, maybe it's reason for them to swap whole hog, but I think it'll be difficult for them to do that in the China market. Everywhere else, I think that's a realistic option.
I think the future to watch is the generalization of these Chinese systems, ADAS or L2++ systems, how they're generalized in the rest of the world. So one thing that Geely did was their GASD system recently got certification in Europe, right? And then He Xiaopeng, he talks about the globalization of their VLA system, how they can be launched in other markets outside of China within a shorter amount of time. That's something to watch. A Chinese system on foreign regions versus, let's say, NVIDIA, right? Alpamayo, right? That's the case in point is Mercedes uses Momento, whereas the rest of the world, they have to use Alfa Romeo with NVIDIA. And it looks like they did a drive, right? Recently in San Francisco, 2.5 hours with Wu Xinzhou, who former head of autonomous driving XPeng. He's right now. So,
The Europeans, we can't lump the European OEMs into like the rest of the world, Japanese, Korean, and American. I just think the European OEMs still are so dependent on the China market that they're going to favor Chinese technology partners in an effort to regain some share in the China market. And so I just look at the European strategy having to be a lot different than everybody else's. Let me see here. Latest I've heard about Canada, we might see a Canadian vehicle in the next, before the end of this year.
you mean a Chinese vehicle in Canada?
Yeah. And then
okay.
Stella talked about, what do you think about Stella in Sao Paulo saying, no JV, we can do this alone. We're looking at Canada. We're looking at buying a foreign brand. And
I
we're
think
looking to enter F1.
Well, I mean, that's from her perspective, right? It's obviously you want autonomy. At the same time, what does Carney want? What does the local politicians and the lobbyists want, right? And then you try to balance that.
Right. So to me, she's starting the negotiation process.
Yeah.
Like in the public.
Sure.
And this is her starting point, line in the sand. And I actually think it would benefit them to have a joint venture partner. I think the Chinese also believe that it would benefit them so let's look at buying a weak foreign brand and joint venture in the similar vein. I'm not a Chinese standalone company. I have revenue that's generated by a European brand or American brand or a Japanese brand. And we have to remember in Canada, Toyota and Honda own a large market share of that market. They build locally in Canada, so they employ a lot of Canadians. I'm not saying that BYD is looking at a Japanese joint venture partner, but it would make the entry into a market a bit less create less friction for them. It helps them with dealer networks, service networks, and I think the biggest negotiating point or the biggest sticking point would be who's the big dog, who's the little dog. Think Daimler Chrysler, right? And BYD has a lot of leverage in that negotiation with a foreign OEM trying to enter North America. Because what's also important, we're talking 3 distinct countries. So it wouldn't make sense for BYD to partner with Toyota in Canada and then partner with Hyundai in the United States. I know I'm not saying that that's who they're talking to. I'm just saying it would need to make sense, in my opinion, for them to have a North American joint venture partner, not 3 different partners in 3 different countries.
Right. And then, so as you predicted, I think a couple of episodes ago, the Xi-Trump meeting looks like it will be delayed at this point. So maybe, I don't know, depending on how the Iran war turns out or progresses, or I don't know when it ever ends, Trump may be visiting while we're there during the auto show. Who knows, right?
I think that might, I don't know.
Right?
I think that's pushed out more than a couple
Even
of
farther,
weeks.
Yeah. It doesn't look promising at this point that it'll end.
I feel like collectively, a lot of our friends in China kind of breathed a sigh of relief because that was another pressure point for them.
Yeah.
The auto show is like all hands on deck all the time for our friends. And then in addition to that, a foreign leader coming, knowing that there is a decent chance that some sort of deal was going to be announced or attempted to be negotiated and agreed to during his visit. So I think there was a sigh of relief from some of our friends.
And then the other thing, a few more minutes. What do you think about the i3? We'll have another long wheelbase edition just for the Chinese market revealing at the Beijing Auto Show. I think BMW is okay. I'm not sure about the design, but I think they try to exceed themselves. They try to kind of, right? I mean,
I think, man, they're twisting themselves into a pretzel because they culturally in their DNA is nickel and dime you for every additional feature. that goes into a vehicle, and a Porsche vehicle, a BMW vehicle. So let's lump these premium brands together. And let's say 5 years ago, 6 years ago, they got anything they wanted, asking price for an ICE vehicle, an S-Class, a 7 Series, an Audi A8. To a lesser extent, Audi was always a little bit weaker, but just 5, 6, 7 years ago, these companies were making boatloads of profits on these cars. Now it's like, I have this i3, it looks kind of cute, a little bit distinctive, but I'm trying to still put all this margin into it, and that's just not going to sell. It's not going to work, because my assumption is that none of the features exceed the best of what China has on offer in China market.
No, right?
Okay, do you agree with that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if you're matching and your price MSRP is still higher, it doesn't make sense for a Chinese consumer, one that doesn't really focus on brand anymore.
That's why I said before that now the Audi AUDI 7X that's launching, the IDERA 9X that's launching. Okay, the interior cockpit, the designs are all very Chinese looking. Inspired. They're right there. But how do you price them? I think it's going to be the most headache leading up to the launch. Because
there's so many challenges. There's so many challenges because there's two things, right? If you price it and then you reduce price, now that does damage to your brand. But now there's an additional thing. If you price it and then reduce it, the Chinese government is like, no.
Yeah, so it's going to be tough.
Man, it is.
Anyhow, I think it's easy to on the look part, on the tech, on the architecture, on the design, styling, those are easy. But yeah, it just
and that's the thing to me, because can we hire a bunch of Chinese designers, software engineers, and manage them? Yes, but if the BMW culture doesn't change, if the General Motor culture doesn't change to adopt faster decision making, more risk taking, then these engineers are going to be underutilized. These engineers aren't going to be able to unlock how these companies will be competitive for the next 25 years in China. Because in my opinion, BYD, these companies in China are going to run into similar challenges when they start managing tens of thousands of employees outside of China. Okay? Sure. Because one of BYD's biggest assets or biggest reasons for being able to scale so quickly, most of everything they do is in China. Now, this is going to break certain companies. It's not going to break BYD, but it's going to break others, these other Chinese companies. You and I both know this. We're not going to speculate yet on which ones we think won't be able to successfully manage teams internationally, but we've already seen hiccups, right?
Yeah. Well, Bianca is done. It's gone, right?
Okay.
I think they're done. That's from what I heard.
So, those 300 million flushed down the toilet? I need to catch up with our friend Ming.
Waving, yeah.
Maybe we'll see him. Maybe we'll see him in Beijing. So, because he's still Renault GM, isn't he?
GM? Well, their Renault is all in on the ACDC in China.
So, anyways, that's all I have, man. I know you're gonna have to go to some volleyball. My kids are off today too, so
last night, interestingly enough, I was having some beer with the parents in the team, and guess what we were talking about? We're talking about the war. We're talking about China EVs. Can you believe that?
Well,
it's surprisingly some of these parents how much knowledge they have. They actually know a lot, so I was quite surprised.
Hey,
so that was interesting.
Again, Lei, thanks to us, I think people owe a lot. I think people owe a lot to us being the OGs in this, right?
Yeah.
I don't care who else is trying to steal our thunder, but I believe there's this handful of people that you and I know, some of them still in China, that have really, really tried to be objective in how we communicate what's going on, who are the players, what are the real reasons things are happening, and correcting a lot of bad takes with the narratives that certain media outlets and certain people and individuals want to try to push. So anyways, it is funny though, isn't it, Lei, that people will always want to talk about this stuff. And
Yeah,
you're absolutely right. Most people, because I've only been back 4 years, so most people still don't know what I do when I go to these parent things, But then once we get to talking, it's, BYD this, BYD that, once they find out. And I'm like, no, dude, no, that's not how it is. But, it
no,
is
I
what
think
it is.
it's definitely gone mainstream. Whether it's the mainstream reporting, Western mainstream reporting, or people are, it's in the headlines every day.
Well, it's going to be north and south of us in a year. So let's go to questions and comments. Good morning. So this is from SPX. Hey, SPX, thanks again for joining, man. Appreciate the consistency. Good morning and happy Friday, guys. Happy Friday to you, sir. Uber soaks up L4 consumer cars again with R2. It means it's the LiDAR version. How will it affect the price and availability of the LiDAR R2 to retail customers?
Well, first of all, RJ is a big proponent of LiDAR, right? There's been many, he's made quite a few recent comments on that. And second, so the LiDAR edition still is coming. We haven't heard too much about it, but
And I don't think Rivian has officially announced who their LiDAR partner is.
But third, think about, I think Hesai just signed, was it Hesai or Robosense signed with a lawnmower brand, 10 million units of
I think
LiDAR.
it's Hesai.
It was Hesai, right? 10 million units. The commoditization of LiDAR is come to the point. I think this is also what RJ mentioned, that it's and important given their current architecture, so that when this comes out, it shouldn't be at too much price. Hopefully, it's more of what they do on the subscription side of the autonomy plus, but it looks like it's going to be a necessary component, at least on the Rivian side.
So,
I mean, you look at SU7 as an example, right? SU7 is standardized with Hesai's LiDAR. But obviously, I mean, they got the volume, whereas Rivian does not have the volume currently.
I think that's the key.
Yeah.
Even at, at its best, let's say R2 sells 150,000 units in the next, a year in 5 years, right? That's still kind of a drop in the bucket for volume. But I'll answer it this way. I'm not an expert on their stack, but we have to remember that there's redundancies here, and then there's going to be sensor diffusion. So how important is that LiDAR into identifying and creating a visual world for the autonomous system? And I think that plays a role in price. Is it a high level RoboSense LiDAR? Is it, a fairly simple RoboSense LiDAR? I don't know. If there are details, please let us know. That's one thing. The other thing is, if I'm Rivian, I'm trying to push other automakers to buy a similar one, right? Because that will bring the price down for everybody. And if it works well, my thought is that it becomes standard in the third revision of the R2 5 years from now. That's how I look at it. Because you'd mentioned RJ is a proponent for LiDAR, so he's on the LiDAR team. Tesla, XPeng are not on the LiDAR team. So,
well, currently, at least on maybe except Tesla, everybody else on a level 4 side is kind of like LiDARs are a must. The content per vehicle increases for these LiDAR suppliers when you go to these L3 and L4. Some of these vehicles that are launching in China, supposedly.
So the next question, Lyft is much quieter in Robotaxi Air. What are their plans, if any? So SPX, look up a company called FlexDrive. They're a Lyft subsidiary, and they're the ones responsible for partnerships with robotaxi companies. The CEO's name is John Parks. I'm a friend of his. So look up what FlexDrive is doing. They're pretty active. They're just not as upfront about it yet. I think there's going to be an opportunity for them to really roll out and communicate a strategy in the next 18, 20 months. So look them up.
Yeah, Lyft, to a much lesser extent compared to Uber, is also signing up partners. I think they're working with Baidu in some certain markets, but just not as active as Uber recently and as big pocketed as Uber recently.
And I think what's really important here is that remember that Lyft also acquired FreeNow, which is a European
yeah.
a European taxi company, or not taxi company, but a platform like
Ride
Uber.
hailing.
Yeah, ride hailing. Again, I can't think this morning, but that made them international because Lyft was just a North America based company, and FreeNow really helps them enter the European market.
Remember 10 years ago, GM invested $500 million in Lyft. And what did they want to do back then? They want to launch an autonomous vehicle ride-hailing network of AVs. And 10 years later, that has not happened.
So what do you guys think of the Q4 earnings of NIO? This is from Jean-Francois Bergeron.
I think we talked about that
Last
maybe
week?
or the week before or last week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like, Q4, I think that was expected. Everybody was expecting that to happen. They worked their asses off to get there, right? Cost wise, but also getting that more profitable ESA out of the lots and making it a little bit more competitive and almost at the expense of their other large SUV, because you comparison shop and the ESA is a great deal, right? Now, full year profitable, I think they've made that official, I believe. That's what they're trying to achieve this year with the 40 to 50% in volume growth. And they have 3 more SUVs coming. So these are support for them to get there. But again, the competitive environment is a lot more cutthroat, especially with the large SUVs. I think we talked about that. So I think it's going to be hard.
NIO is ascending, just like XPeng, but again, we know that this is also very cyclical because BYD was on the downward trend, but they then freaking pulled themselves to the forefront with all their announcements.
BYD supposedly have another event specifically on autonomous driving features or level 2 plus. I heard like the God's Eye thing. Maybe they have another 2.0 or something. I don't know.
Well, don't be surprised if BYD will have a major announcement during the Beijing Auto Show.
Well, everybody's going to have a major announcement.
Yeah,
pretty much.
for sure.
Or ahead of it.
Anyways, that's all I have, man. So why don't we end it there? I'm late.
Same here.
4 minutes late for another call. Everyone,
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We will talk with you all next week. Bye-bye.